What is up, gang? Today is day 9, PR30, and today we are going to talk about this concept that everything beautiful is a judge. It's a statement that isn't entirely obvious on its face, but has become one of the more profound realizations in my life over the last 2 years. And by profound, I also mean transformative. For me, this statement, everything beautiful as a judge, in order to explain what exactly I mean, I can start with what you've seen in the first 8 days of these PR30 videos, and that is this replica of the archaic torso of Apollo behind me. The reason I have this statue is because one of my favorite poets and writers, Rainier Maria Rilke, wrote a poem called The Archaic Torso of Apollo. And in that poem, we have a narrator who observes, he himself, it's sort of him narrating his witnessing, standing in the presence of this statue and observing there is no head, there are no arms, there is no bottom part of the torso, yet somehow the torso is suffused with the brilliance from inside. Otherwise it would not gleam in all its power. That's basically, his observation. It's this cracked thing. It's incomplete. We don't even have the full picture, but somehow it glows because it's beautiful. So in the poem, the narrator makes these observations as if he's the one observing the statue. But then we get to the end of the poem, and the last 2 lines are, "For here there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life." So here we have this statue that isn't moving, isn't talking, isn't doing anything at all, yet somehow still convicts the observer. That is the subject of the poem, The Archaic Torso of Apollo. We see this also in the story of Plutarch. Plutarch tells the story of Julius Caesar coming to the Temple of Hercules and standing in the presence of this statue of Alexander the Great. And the statue shows Alexander the Great as the same age that Julius was when he looks at this statue. And as the story goes, Julius looks at this statue of Alexander, and in that moment, he is suddenly convicted by the fact that Alexander, at his age, as depicted by the statue, has done far more glory-filled things, activities, than Julius had done at a similar age. And Julius basically convicts himself, and he says, what have I done up to this point in my life, in comparison to what Alexander did? Again, another instance of just standing in the presence of a statue that judges you in its brilliance, in its beauty, in its glory, and just having this sort of light shone back on you and highlighting where you might be less than you could be. So there's this judgment that happens and the gap between you and your potentiality. A few months ago, I was in Florida for the Symbolic World Conference, and we were taking a tour of this Greek Orthodox cathedral. And as we were taking this tour, Jonathan Pajot was sort of walking all of us through the iconography and the symbolism of all of the various works of art and on the ceiling and the various statues, and it was a powerful experience. I remember at the end of this experience, everybody was sort of leaving the Orthodox cathedral to go to the convention, and just lingering sort of in the pews for a moment. And behind the altar, there was this figure of Christ hanging on a cross. And I remember just sort of sitting there meditating. And in that moment, the words came up to me, and it says, "For here there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life." Obviously being a hyperlink for me into, reminded me of Rilke's poem. This idea, the archaic torso of Apollo, for here there is no place that does not see you, you must change your life. So it came to this idea, this realization, when we think about Christ in the Christian tradition is the landing of beauty on earth. He is the embodiment of the Logos. He is the Word become flesh. And so even though he is simultaneously both the kindest figure in history and also the harshest judge, not because of anything he says, and not because of anything he does, just by virtue of how beautiful he is as a person, how much he glows. Obviously, Son of God has a particular glow about him and represents a level of perfection that cannot be reached by flawed man. But still, just the presence of his existence, knowing just his presence convicts us of the gap between us and the divine. And so there's this conviction that happens just by being in the presence of the beautiful. I was watching Lion King last night, and it reminded me of this topic, why I'm even talking about it in the first place. So there's a scene, if you remember, to summarize the story. So Simba, he leaves the Pride Lands after Mufasa dies. Scar, his uncle, killed him, but he's ashamed that he may have played some role in his father's death. And so he runs away, and by running away, he is running from his right to the throne as heir of the throne. And he goes to live in a land of Hakuna Matata, no worries for the rest of your days, with Timon and Pumbaa. And he seems to be enjoying it until Nala comes and delivers the bad news that because he has left the rest of his pride behind, Scar has taken over, and him and the hyenas have turned this place into a barren wasteland. So by neglecting his birthright and not becoming the king he was capable of becoming, he sort of left the rest of his pride to suffer the consequences for that. So when Nala comes and asks him to come back and take his place as a rightful heir, Simba originally doesn't want to do it. He sort of denies it. He says, no, I'm not going to do that. I can't go back. And when he has that response, this is one of my favorite scenes happens, and it's Rafiki. And Rafiki takes Simba to a pool. He's asking Simba the question, who are you? Who are you? He tells Simba, Mufasa isn't dead, he lives inside you. Simba's having all of these doubts about his ability, and he wants to completely turn his back on his past and turn his back on his birthright, his inheritance as king. But then Rafiki stays on him and he tells him, look harder into this pool. And what does Simba see? He sees this image of Mufasa that slowly comes. And then he sees Mufasa in the clouds. And there's this representation there of what Simba is seeing is his ancestral potential. He's seeing the king he's capable of being in the form of his father make itself manifest in the pool and in the clouds. It's something like Nietzsche's statement, if you look long enough into the abyss will look back into you. That is what happens when Simba looks into the pool, is the abyss looks back into him. Because what we find when we look into the abyss isn't nothing. It is actually, we come out the bottom to the top, to the ideal. We find where we ourselves are found wanting. We find the ultimate sort of object of beauty, the highest thing we can conceptualize. This is Christ. This is also Mufasa for Simba. And we are convicted in the presence of that thing, of that ideal that tells us we are not who we could be. And so as the last couple years, this idea that allowing beauty to judge me has transformed me is as I fundamentally believe, as you seek out more beauty in your life, whether it's in art or in music or in nature, putting yourself and soaking yourself in beauty will work in you. It will transform you. It will constantly require that you change aspects of your life that no longer deserve to come with you into the future. If you are going to engage in this project of excelsior being the Latin word for ever upward, then it is necessary that you must constantly be shedding things no longer worthy of your pursuits, which necessarily means following the beautiful things and their example, allowing them to be a judge, and allowing yourself to be judged, and taking that as truth and not avoiding judgment. I think often we avoid judgment because shame has become a dirty word in our culture. And I'm not saying all shame is good, but some shame is, in the sense that shame is a motivating factor for us to strive upward. And that is what beauty does, is it brings a level of shame. But if we're honest with ourselves, that shame only highlights where we are not who we could be. That is the utility of putting yourself in the presence of beauty. And that is what I mean when I say everything beautiful is a judge. That's enough for today. Until next time, peace.